Chronicles.
I'm Brick.
A historical.
Oh.
You
just told me. Okay.
Welcome to Celluloid Chronicles,
A historical movie podcast.
I'm Birdy.
I'm Brick.
We're Brick and Birdy, and we're back. We are here to give you our historical take on another wonderful movie. And what are we doing this week?
This week, Birdy chose The Favorite.
Yes, The Favorite from...
It was released in 2018.
All right, yes. Before we get into it, I want to do some... I guess we're already doing some housekeeping on episode 2. After we received great feedback on our first episode, which led us to also splitting that episode. We have a part 1, part 2 for The Other Balloon Girl. That was based on feedback from you guys. And so this week we also, in order to streamline some of our deep historical dives into this wonderful history that we're bringing you, but also trying to streamline, we will be doing now outtakes or trivia episodes. You may have already noticed those sprinkled throughout, and we'll be giving you deeper dives on some of the great history that we couldn't incorporate into our episodes.
And if anybody thinks of a fun name for that, let us know.
I was trying to think of like outtakes or trivia, something movie related, but yeah. I will definitely take any suggestions. All right, well, we'll get right into it.
Hello, Editor Birdy here. I'm dropping in because in our excitement to bring you our most inspired commentary, we failed to give you fair trigger warning. For this episode, there will be discussions of child loss, abuse, suicidal ideation, and a mention of sexual assault. Do take care of your mind and body.
Brick, take us in.
So The Favorite was released November 23rd, 2018. This is for their American release. A budget of $15 million, which pretty skimpy movie-wise, and in the fun facts, I'll get into why. This was written by Deborah Davis and Tony McNamara and directed by Yorgos Lanthimos. It's starring Olivia Coleman as Queen Anne, Emma Stone as Abigail Hill, and Rachel Weisz is continuing her good work of bisexual awakening as Lady Sarah Marlborough. So...
I love it.
Birdy, can you give us some context, the history behind what we're going to be seeing?
Sure. So this is going to be a bit longer before we get back into the actual movie, but this is like basically the lead up of Queen Anne's life, how she met Sarah Churchill, how she came to power. So I'm going to try to streamline it as much as I can, but bear with me.
If you don't like history, why the hell are you listening? Maybe cut that.
Our dear Anne was born in 1665 as the fourth child of the Duke of York, King Charles II's younger brother. A clear as ever situation of unlikely to see the throne, as there ever was one. James, Duke of York, and his first wife Anne Hyde, who was the daughter of the first Earl of Clarendon. Anne and Mary being her elder sister, were the only children of her parents to survive to adulthood. Now, as a quick catch-up, by Anne's birth, it's been some 60 years since the death of Queen Elizabeth I, whom we met as a child in our last episode. It's only been 15 years since her grandfather, King Charles I, was executed after pissing off Parliament, and Oliver Cromwell, the king killer, ruled the Council of State for about 10 years after the English Civil War. We are now very solidly in a Protestant Anglican England in this Stuart dynasty, and Catholics are very much not wanted at this point. However, Anne's father, James, quickly finds himself converting to Catholicism with his wife, and it's really the beginning of yet more conflict in the English monarchy. This is in stalwart contrast to the contemporary court of King Louis XIV, known as the Sun King, that bastard, who is ruling France at this time. So my ultimate note here is saddest fucking rich family ever. Anne herself was born plagued by medical issues, especially her eyes. She spent most of her life traveling around England and France trying to find places of relief for her conditions, especially later with her many pregnancies. In 1669, she was living with her paternal grandmother, Henrietta Maria, in Paris when she suddenly died about a year after that. And then she moved in with her paternal aunt, Henrietta Anne, Duchess of Orleans, when she suddenly died that same year. Possibly of poison, definitely a whole other story. And so after losing both her grandmother and her aunt, she moved back to England, only to have her own mother pass away the next year in 1671 from complications from childbirth and breast cancer.
God damn.
Yeah, again, saddest fucking family ever.
Money don't buy happiness.
No. So around this time, she first met Sarah Jennings, later Sarah Churchill, Duchess of Marlborough. Sarah filled a confidant and sisterly role that Anne's own sister, Mary, refused to fill, as Mary would later kick her out of court and basically exiled her until Mary's death. This is way later. Sarah had met Anne as a child while Sarah was a teenager, and I quote, Anne found herself irresistibly drawn to this self-assured and dynamic woman. Sarah was skillful and maneuvered herself into Anne's favor and circle and was always in control. During Anne's reign, gossip said that while Anne ruled England, Sarah ruled the Queen.
I would have thought from the way they made it seem in the movie that the Queen was older.
Well, you know.
Yeah. I mean, Rachel Weisz has to be the
Rachel
hot one.
Weisz is,
She's eternally hot. So.
I mean, God, she doesn't look a day past the Mummy.
No.
It was actually true that Sarah was particularly harsh with the Queen and would reduce her to tears and tell her what to say and do under certain circumstances. Of course, later we'll find out that comes back to haunt Sarah. In November 1677, Anne's sister, Mary, married her Dutch first cousin, William of Orange, son of their Aunt Mary, Princess Royal, at St. James Palace. But Anne could not attend the wedding because she was confined to her room with smallpox. Smallpox will plague this family, literally. As for Anne herself, in an effort to appease both Protestants and their Catholic ally, Louis XIV of France, King Charles looked elsewhere for an eligible prince for Anne to marry. A marriage treaty between Anne and Prince George of Denmark, the younger brother of King Christian V, was negotiated and they were married in 1683. Anne and George were also second cousins, once removed, through Anne and George's great-great-grandfather, King Frederick II of Denmark, whose daughter married James I and IV of England and Scotland. We also start at this point her successive pregnancies, which are notable to bring up because of the role they played in how the emotional toll comes out on screen, at least from my part, was very visible on that. In 1684, shortly after her marriage, her first pregnancy ended in stillbirth. In 1685 and 86, she did give birth to two girls, Mary and Anne Sophia, who survived birth. In 1685, Anne's father became James II after Charles II's death. Despite claiming at the start of his reign that he would not give power to any Catholics or force Catholic doctrine into his kingship, he quickly changed his mind and started giving Catholics military and administrative offices, despite several laws in place meant to prevent this. Anne was decidedly concerned by this. Now in her early 20s, she had been raised Anglican and was decidedly devout in these services. So much so, she wrote very contentious letters disavowing other non-Anglican Protestants as dissenters. Her sister Mary, living in the Netherlands, was much the same way, and the sisters wrote frequently on the issue during James's reign. When her father tried to get Anne to baptize her youngest daughter into the Catholic faith, Anne burst into tears. She wrote to her sister, and I quote, "The doctrine of the Church of Rome is wicked and dangerous. Their ceremonies, most of them, plain downright idolatry." Anne obviously became estranged from her father and stepmother at this time. Unfortunately, Anne's sorrows continued. In 1687, all within a matter of days, she miscarried a fourth child. Her husband caught smallpox and barely survived. Her two small daughters died of smallpox.
Oh, man.
Later that same year, she had another stillbirth for a second time as her fifth child. Shit continued to hit the fan when Mary of Modena, James II's wife, became pregnant after 10 years of miscarriages and stillbirths of her own.
Oh my God.
And eventually gave birth to a son, James Francis Edward, in 1688. Anne was so alarmed and distraught over this that she insisted to everyone, and in letters to her sister, that the Queen was faking her pregnancy in an attempt to introduce a false heir. She wrote, "They will stick at nothing, be it ever so wicked, if it will promote their interest. There may be foul play intended."
I love your Queen Anne voice.
And unfortunately, Anne had another miscarriage that April in 1688, her sixth child, which did not help her mood toward the situation. So we quickly come up on what we now know as the Glorious Revolution. All while everything everything else was happening, Anne's sister Mary and her husband, William of Orange, were being asked by Parliament to come take the throne. At this point, contention in the family was at such a peak that James forbade Anne from visiting her sister Mary in 1687, leading Anne to start a correspondence with her sister and made her become aware of the plans to invade. And on the advice of her friend Sarah and her husband, she took William and Mary's side and even approved on the action in a written letter. Obviously, in the interest of time, I'll skip a lot of the details of the actual invasion. Just know everyone abandoned James in the end. I kind of pitied the guy in this whole area. It was very, oh, I would never leave you, and then decidedly left him in like the middle of the night kind of shit.
That's rough.
Like literally having dinner with him. I think there's a story and they're like, oh yeah, it's terrible. It's terrible. All these people are turning on you. Waiting for him to go to bed and then literally riding off.
I shouldn't laugh.
I wanted to read all these stories, but it just would not fit. So James was soundly betrayed and he fled to France in 1688. So obviously this was all in the same year. By January, a convention parliament assembled in England and declared that James had effectively abdicated when he fled, and that the thrones of England and Ireland were therefore vacant. The Parliament or Estates of Scotland took similar action, and William and Mary were declared monarchs of all three realms. Quickly followed the Bill of Rights and the Claim of Right Act, which settled the succession at that point. Anne and her descendants were to be in the line of succession after William and Mary. Happily, on the 24th of July, 1689, Anne gave birth to a son, her seventh child, Prince William, Duke of Gloucester, who, though ill, survived infancy. As William and Mary had no children, Mary had one miscarriage near the start of their marriage and never got pregnant again. It looked as though Anne's son would eventually inherit the crown. In October the following year, she gave birth to a daughter, her eighth child, who died within 2 hours. It's around this time that, at Anne's request, she and Sarah Churchill began to call each other the pet names Mrs. Morley and Mrs. Freeman, respectively, to facilitate a relationship of greater equality between the two when they were alone. In 1692, William and Mary were already at odds with Anne and her household, but suspecting that the Duke of Marlborough was secretly conspiring with James's followers, at this point they're called the Jacobites.
Oh, that's what they are.
Yeah, so
I've heard that, but I never knew what it was.
Yeah, not to take up a lot of time on this. Basically, Jacob is the biblical name for James. James means Jacob.
Okay.
So, Jacobites.
Oh,
there you go.
I've always heard that, but I never bothered to see where it came from.
I know I'd heard it before, but it always slipped my mind. But yes, that's where the Jacobites come from. They're just the follower. They believe that James's line should have continued the throne.
Gotcha.
Secretly conspiring with James's followers, William and Mary dismissed him from all offices. In a public show of support for the Marlboroughs, Anne took Sarah to a social event at the palace and refused her sister's request to dismiss Sarah from her household. It was a whole thing. Anne then took up residence at Syon House, which was kind of outside the court, the home of the Duke of Somerset, where Anne was stripped of her guard of honor and courtiers were forbidden to visit her, and civic authorities were instructed to ignore her.
Damn.
Yeah. Along with this, in the meantime, in April, Anne gave birth to a son, her ninth child, who died within minutes. Mary visited her, but instead of offering comfort, took the opportunity to berate Anne once again for her friendship with Sarah. The sisters never saw each other again. Anne then moved to Berkeley House in Piccadilly, London, where she had a stillborn daughter in March 1693. By the next year, she once again miscarried a child, her 11th. The sex was undetermined. Then, when Mary died of smallpox in 1694, William continued to reign alone. Anne became his heir apparent, and the two reconciled publicly. According to former King James, Anne wrote to him in 1696 requesting his permission to succeed William, and thereafter promising to restore the crown to James's line at a convenient opportunity. But he actually declined to give his consent. She was probably trying to ensure her own succession by attempting to prevent a direct claim by James. In the meantime, that February 1696, she miscarried of another daughter, her 12th child. In September of that year, she suffered a particularly traumatic miscarriage, where she miscarried one child, a boy, only to miscarry again within a day to a smaller child, which historians quote, "Her Royal Highness miscarried of 2 children, the one of 7 months growth, the other of 2 or 3 months. as her physicians and midwife judged. One was born the day after the other. If so, the smaller fetus was probably a blighted twin or fetus papyraceus. These would be her 13th children. She then miscarried again in 1697, her 14th child, the sex undetermined. Later that same year, she miscarried again of twins, possibly both boys, her 15th children. In 1698, she once again had a stillborn son, her 16th child. And then once again, and finally, she gave birth to a stillborn son on January 24th, 1700. This would be her final child, her 17th. Anne had been pregnant at least 17 times over as many years and had miscarried or given birth to stillborn children at least 12 times. Of her 5 live-born children, 4 died before the age of 2. Given all this, Anne experienced bouts of gout, pains in her limbs, and eventually stomach and head from at least 1698. Based on her fetal losses and physical symptoms, she may have had systemic lupus erythematosus or antiphospholipid syndrome. Alternatively, pelvic inflammatory disease could explain why the onset of her symptoms roughly coincided with her penultimate pregnancy. Other suggested causes of her failed pregnancies are listeriosis, diabetes, intrauterine growth retardation, or rhesus incompatibility. Rhesus incompatibility, however, generally worsens with successive pregnancies and so does not fit the pattern of Anne's pregnancies, as her only son to survive infancy, Prince William, Duke of Gloucester, was born after a series of stillbirths. Experts also believe syphilis, porphyria, and pelvic deformation to be unlikely, as the symptoms are incompatible with her medical history. Obviously, this led to lameness and obesity throughout her later life, and probably led partly to the disrespect she also endured. And now we come to the extremely hard part. Anne's sole surviving child, the Duke of Gloucester, died at age 11 on the 30th of July, 1700, shortly after his birthday. She and her husband were overwhelmed with grief. Anne ordered her household to observe a day of mourning every year on the anniversary of his death. It's believed he contracted meningitis around his birth, which led to hydrocephalus, or swelling of liquid on the brain, causing his head to be rather large. He suffered recurrent bouts of sickness throughout his life, which were treated with the worst of 17th century medicine. His actual death is thought to be from bacterial pharyngitis with associated pneumonia, but no one is sure other than a terrible fever with convulsions. Regardless, had he even lived, he would have still likely succumbed to the hydrocephalus while still young. And so ends all her children. And then it leaves us with William childless and Gloucester dead. Anne was the only person remaining in the line of succession established by the Bill of Rights in 1689. To address the succession crisis and preclude a Catholic restoration, the Parliament of England enacted the Act of Settlement in 1701, which provided that, failing the children of Anne and William III by any future marriage, the crown of England and Ireland would go to Sophia, Electress of Hanover, and her Protestant descendants. Sophia was the granddaughter of James VI and I through his daughter Elizabeth, who was the sister of Anne's grandfather, Charles I. As a note, Sophia was about 70 at this time.
Oh.
Yeah, but she had children.
Oh, okay.
Anne's father died in 1701. His widow, the former queen, wrote to Anne to inform her that her father forgave her and to remind her of her promise to seek the restoration of his line. But Anne had already acquiesced to the line of succession created by the Act of Settlement. So soon enough, King William III died in 1702. These people are just
dropping.
Dead. And Anne took the throne as queen. She was actually pretty popular in the beginning, made sure to appoint all of her favorites around her, with Sarah Churchill, of course, being made groom of the stool, mistress of the robes, and keeper of the privy purse. Anne was not to rule in peace. She was crowned on April 23rd, 1702, and by May 4th, England became involved in the Spanish War of Succession, in which England, Austria, and the Dutch Republic fought against France and Bourbon Spain. Charles II of Spain had died childless. Wow, they're all related. It's a giant web. And the succession was disputed by 2 claimants, the Habsburg Archduke Charles of Austria and the Bourbon Philip, Duke of Anjou in France. And so, please excuse that very long intro, but now I will happily turn it over to Brick, who will bring us now to vaguely the start of the movie. This timeline is vague, but it's vaguely the start of the movie.
We open with a stylized version of Elton John's Skyline Pigeon, which I love. I had no idea. It sounded familiar familiar, but I couldn't figure out what it was until I was reading the fun facts. Oh, that's what that is. I love our introduction to Queen Anne and Sarah and their relationship. We see Queen Anne. She has just given a speech. She's asking Sarah, did I lisp? No, you don't lisp. Well, I was thinking about it, so I was afraid I would, which I absolutely love. She's neurotic as hell.
And she was. If there's anything I can say is that the characterization in this movie is spot on.
Which is funny because the actors purposely did not read much about the characters they were reading. They wanted to kind of have it happen organically, who they thought they should be. And especially Olivia Coleman's, hers seems to have just been like the little bit that I do know. Like at one point she had somebody asked her, do you believe she was a petulant child? And she answered that she thinks she was just an underconfident person who had too much power and too much time on her hands and never knew if anybody really actually loved her.
See that?
Yeah.
I could see that. She had some confidence, but that I could read into her. I mean, we never know. Because of the dynamic she had with Sarah, who was aggressive, who was very ahead of her time, a feminist before her time, basically. Not to give her too much credit, because she was also a bitch. Yeah, the characterizations are pretty spot on. So that really surprises me, because despite not really involving 10% of the movie is actually historical fact, but the people they're playing are just perfect. So
yeah, they do really well.
And the writing,
oh my God, I have to tell you, in the fun facts, I will tell you about the writing, which just really amazed me.
All right.
So we see Queen Anne. She presents Sarah with the model of a palace that she is going to have built for her, which Sarah points out, we need to be spending our money and our resources on this war. We are at war with the French. This is what we need to focus on. And Queen Anne's surprised because, we won. And Sarah tells her, we're still at war, which she's surprised by. So that kind of gives us a clue that, at least in the movie, Queen Anne is not super involved. She doesn't know a whole lot about what the hell is going on in her own court and kingdom. It's kind of fallen to Sarah. She's kind of, taking care of a lot of the stuff. We also meet Abigail. She is coming in on a overcrowded carriage. And like many of our female presenting listeners will know who ride public transportation, she smiles at some guy who immediately starts jerking off.
God, it was so real.
Yeah, I'm sure many of you have experienced something similar. So when she eventually, thankfully, gets to get out of the carriage and get away from this guy, again, all too familiar, he reaches out and pinches her butt and she falls down in the mud. Abigail enters through the servants' entrance. She is taken upstairs by this bitch maid Sally, who tells her she's going to take her somewhere to clean up before she sees Lady Marlborough. And instead, she takes her right to her and some others, her husband and Lord Godolphin, just a way to embarrass her. So she's in there just covered in stinky mud. At one point, she says, this mud stinks. And Sally says, they shit in the streets around here. They call it political commentary, which maybe we should take that up again. Yes. It's a thought. But anyways, she's talking to Sarah. She lets her know, we're cousins. I have a letter from our aunt. I'm hoping that you can offer me employment. And we learn from the others that she had a position, she had a good life, but her father gambled away all the money and then burned their house down while he was still inside. Even so, Sarah seems to have admired him. Maybe she was just amused by him, but she seems to have enjoyed him nevertheless. She does employ Sarah as a maid in the kitchen, so she does at least do that much. She does offer her a position in the kitchen at least. Suddenly, we are at a duck race, which I would love to see. I
want to see it.
Right, I would absolutely go to a duck race.
As long as the ducks are taken care of
yeah,
course, but.
Yeah. We also, at this point, we meet Nicholas Hoult, which, how is he that goddamn hot in that fucking ridiculous ass wig?
Oh my God, Nicholas Hoult. I have a little trivia.
Okay.
On
having a son.
Nicholas Hoult. He's one of my favorite actors right now. Absolutely.
So Nicholas Hoult is playing Lord Harley, and he confronts Sarah about the money that's going to be spent building this palace while they're supposed to be at war, which a war he and his party do not want. They want to reach a peace settlement with France. They don't want to keep spending the nation's money and sending all these good men out to die, and she completely just dismisses him. He does ask to have a meeting with the Queen, and she kind of blows that off. We also get this nice little introduction connection to the winning duck, Horatio, the fastest duck in the city, who will come back later.
Oh, that's that part.
We see Queen Anne. She is getting ready to have a very important meeting with a Russian delegation, but she sees Sarah first, who points out her makeup, and Queen Anne said that her and, I guess, her makeup artist decided to go for something dramatic, which Sarah says makes her look like a badger, but looks like when I tried to do smoky eye for the first time, 5th time, 12th time. The queen just, leaves. She goes back to her bedroom. Sarah says she'll take care of this. So we're very quickly getting the impression that Sarah is very important, very much in control, and she takes on a lot of the queen's responsibilities. And I love the scene with Queen Anne going back to her bedroom, and she's passing this poor footman who does not look at her, but she stops and, did you look at me? Did you just look at me? Look at me! Look at me! How dare you look at me!
I love that scene so much.
I rewinded that and watched that several times.
It reminds me of so many people. Won't even go there. So many.
We also see Abigail living that good old servant life, overcrowded dormitories and communal baths using the same bar of soap. She's in the kitchen, and Sally the bitch makes a second appearance, giving her a bucket and telling her she needs to scrub the floor, but she's really just set her up to get a chemical burn, not warning her that she needs to wear gloves with a lie, and she ends up with a pretty bad chemical burn on her hand. A little bit later, Abigail is sent upstairs with supplies because the queen is suffering an attack of gout. And when she gets there, Sarah is there trying to comfort her, trying to calm her down while everybody else attends to her. She eventually has everyone but Abigail leave, and in order to distract her while Abigail tends to her leg, she tells her to tell me the story of how we met, which sounds honestly like a great story. So, at least in the movie, some asshole was holding her down as she was a child and spitting on her. Sarah fucked him up, basically. I don't know what she would have hit him with, but she hit him with something, and it sounds like she broke his jaw, which, hey, get it.
Love it so much.
Yep. The story is overlaying the scenes of Abigail. She, borrows a horse and she goes out into the woods to find herbs to treat her chemical burn. And this is when we first see Samuel Alwyn playing Masham. He's watching her and she just kind of...
His name's Samuel Masham. Well, Samuel? Mm-hmm. Wow, cool. Yeah. So I'm going to interject here just a little bit. I think at this point we've already seen... Have we seen the rabbits yet?
Very, very quickly in the beginning.
Okay, so we saw... The rabbits, unfortunately, did not exist. I kind of would have loved if Queen Anne kind of had those kind of pets, but I do like the symbolism of them. As I've talked about, Anne did in fact have 17 pregnancies. Symbolism of them as her children was very a nice touch. Tiny fun fact, rabbits were considered primarily a source of food at the time. It wasn't until the 1800s that they became common pets. Although today, they are still considered a good source of meat. Lab animals and still used for fur in fashion. Quite diverse creatures. A little bit of an outtake there. And yes, as Brick mentioned, England was at war with France in 1705, but really they were in a European-wide war, which was called the War of Spanish Succession. As I mentioned a little bit earlier, this conflict began in 1701 and continued until 1714. In North America, the colonies, this war was also known as Queen Anne's War, although in the movie, the larger wars never mentioned. And as we talked about, Nicholas Hoult was playing Robert Harley, the first Earl of Oxford and Mortimer. He was a big part of the Parliament, playing a Tory. So we got these Whigs and Tories going on. He is my favorite, but I will note that Robert Harley, at that point in time, about 1705, which is kind of the nebulous time frame of this movie, was 44. Nicholas Hoult at the time was 28. And I will also mention during this time that after many threats and acts between Scotland and England, a commission was formed by Queen Anne in 1706 to negotiate terms of a union they'd already been working on for quite a while. The Articles of Union were approved in July 1706 and ratified by the Scottish and English parliaments in January and March of 1707, respectively. Under the Acts of Union, England and Scotland were united into a single kingdom called Great Britain, with one parliament on May 1st, 1707. Thus, Anne was the last monarch of England and the first monarch of Great Britain. She was also the last Stuart monarch. So I'll let Rick get back to things.
We see Abigail. She's gotten her herbs and she's been getting checked out by Masham. She eventually decides she's going to take these herbs to the queen. She kind of lies to the footman, kind of bullies her way in, which I love.
Yeah, it was great.
She's in there applying it while the queen is sleeping. And Lady Marlborough, Sarah and her husband Marlborough and several other seem to be council members, they come in and she finds Abigail applying this paste to the queen's legs, and she has the footman take her back to the kitchens and tells him, make sure she gets 6 of the birch, so she's going to be whipped. She's taken away, and they have all these maps spread out over the bed, and they're trying to fill the queen in on the situation, what's going on with the war, but she's pretty out of it, doesn't seem to quite understand what they're talking about, but she does mention that her leg feels better. Whatever is on there, it's taken the burn out. So Sarah realizes that Abigail did help, and somehow she instantly transports from the bedroom to the kitchen very, very quickly and stops the beating after only 3 strikes. I mean, if she was going to haul her ass down there that quick, she could have gotten down there a little bit quicker, but whatever. And she takes her aside and thanks her for what she's done with the queen. They kind of have a bonding moment. Abigail tells her that her father always spoke kindly of her. And Sarah shares that she always thought highly of him. And then we find out that, at least in the movie, I have no idea if this is true or anything relating even slightly true, I hope not, that Abigail's father lost her in a card game to some German man who seems to have used her for sexual purposes. And when I first saw this, I was thinking, oh my God, that's terrible. And as it went on and, other things that she said, I wondered if it even actually happened, even as far as the background of the movie. But she says that she was able to convince him that she has her period 28 days a month, so it wasn't too bad, I guess. Lady Marlborough, Sarah makes Abigail her personal maid, which comes with a few perks as far as having her own room now. She gets to sleep in private, and she gets to accompany Sarah throughout her day. And this includes meetings with the queen and council members, all these important people, seeing her going about kind of using her power, making decisions. We see her as she's walking down a hall, making these pronouncements to people of, this is what we'll do, don't you do this again. And we also see her running into Masham, who obviously has the hots for Abigail.
So I can insert a little bit more just because we've already met this concept of the Parliament, Whigs and Tories. I'll try to do this quickly because Anne's reign was marked by the further development of the two-party system. We don't know anything about that, do we? In general, Tories were supportive of the Anglican Church and favored the landed interest of the country gentry, while the Whigs were more puritanical and were aligned with commercial interests and Protestant dissenters. As a committed Anglican, Anne was inclined to favor the Tories. Her first ministry was predominantly Tory. It was headed by Lord Treasurer Lord Godolphin and Anne's favorite, the Duke of Marlborough, who were considered moderate Tories at the time, along with the Speaker of the House of Commons, Robert Harley. It was later that the Marlboroughs, during the war, became Whigs. The movie actually shows us pretty great with the costuming. The Whigs wear black wigs, and the Tories wear white, powdered, floofy wigs. The Whigs vigorously supported the War of Spanish Succession and became even more influential after the Duke of Marlborough's many victories, especially his victory at the Battle of Blenheim in 1704. Godolphin, Marlborough, and Harley formed a ruling triumvirate, where Sarah, the Duchess of Marlborough, incessantly badgered the Queen to appoint more Whigs and reduce the power of the Tories, whom she considered little better than Jacobites, and the Queen became increasingly discontented with her. The Tories start to complain that they are paying a lot of money for a Whig project they didn't agree to, as Brick mentioned, so the main plot of the film begins, and that's when Abigail enters about that time. A little note on Abigail, no, she was not gambled away in mist.
Thank God.
And as far as I understand it, there was no fire where her father died. They were just generally impoverished. He was generally extremely bad with money. That actually was true. Abigail was part of another Duke of Kent. Some guy at Kent, and somewhere in Kent, she was part of that household, just because they were extremely poor. whore. So the thing was, Sarah did not know really about Abigail or her uncle or anything. Her grandfather, John Jennings, I believe, had 22 children.
God damn.
So it stands to reason that Sarah didn't know all of her numerous first cousins, children of 22 individuals.
Yeah, that's a lot to keep track of.
So,
it's a hell of a...
Yeah, according to Sarah's writings, she was not aware of Abigail until, like, Abigail reached out or something happened where she ended up becoming part of Sarah's household and then the Queen's household. She kind of took part in court. It wasn't some weird scheme or anything like that. Yeah, so that's the little outtake on Abigail Hill. So it was really after Anne came to the throne that Abigail received an appointment in the Queen's household in the year 1704. So it was shortly before the supposed beginning of this film. Before that, she actually worked for Sarah in St. Albans at Sarah's household outside the court. All right, so with the little outtake on Abigail Hill, I will turn it back over to Brick.
As part of her duties in assisting with Sarah, she also attends a meeting that was supposed to be with the Queen, and it's between Harley and Godolphin. We see them sitting and talking, and this is where we get to see Horatio again, the duck. And I just wanted to include, because this tickled me, when I paused the movie at this point for some reason, the credits popped up, and the very first credit was Horatio.
Oh, excellent.
And it was Horatio, the fastest duck in the city.
Yes!
And I don't know why, that just made me laugh so hard. Anyway.
You know it's a good production when they honor the animals.
I know, right? And Godolphin's pointing out that, he can't leave Horatio behind because, this duck's worth stealing. And Harley and Godolphin are discussing the war. They feel very differently with what they should do. Harley feeling they should back down and sue for peace, and Godolphin thinks they should continue. And when Sarah comes in, Harley's upset because they were supposed to meet with the Queen directly. But they have to meet with Sarah instead, who tells them that not only are they going to continue with the war before trying for a peace treaty, but they are going to double the land tax in order to pay for it. And Harley gets very upset. And I love this scene because he ends up yelling and kicking a vase, and then he goes and tries to intimidate her by staring her down, and there's such a height difference that he's basically like staring down into her face. She does not react at all. She just stares straight back at him, and then he leaves. And Abigail is witness to all of this, so she's kind of soaking it in, what Sarah does and how she does it. She's gonna start learning these things.
She's learning.
Mm-hmm. We see Marlborough telling his wife goodbye. He is going to the front. As he's leaving, Sarah and the Queen are watching him from the window, and as the Queen's going back to her rooms, Abigail makes a point of pretending to cough to catch her attention. She points out that, I must have caught in a cold getting the herbs for you. So she's put herself in the Queen's eye line. She's caught her attention and made herself stand out to her. Sarah invites Abigail to go shooting, and they have a discussion of sacrifices. So Abigail is wanting to know, why are you sending your husband away? Why are you making these sacrifices? And Sarah just kind of points out that you need to make sacrifices for things that are important, and for her, that's her country.
Sarah was very devoted to England and Great Britain eventually, and I do want to give her credit for that. How she went about it, questionable.
Abigail sees Masham again, and they have this, cute little flirtation where he threatens to have her whipped for stealing a horse.
I was gonna say cute.
And next thing we know, we are at a ball. Queen is wheeled in by wheelchair. Everybody has been waiting for her. Harley takes a chance to try to speak with her, try to tell her that doubling the land tax is a bad idea, and it's just going to cause problems with her subjects. Sarah swoops in to stop the conversation, and just as a little aside, I love that she recommends he goes and tries the venison and horseradish puffs, which sound fucking delicious.
Actually, that does sound...
Oh my god, I want some. Sarah puts a stop to this conversation, but we kind of get the idea that the land tax is a surprise. The queen did not know about this. This was not her directive.
Not shocking.
Mm-hmm. And Sarah's trying to distract everybody, so she starts dancing with Masham, this weird ass dance. It's a weird ass dance.
And it was meant to be.
Yes. And I love every minute of it. But as she's watching, the queen becomes upset, and it's this really, really beautiful acting moment from Olivia Coleman where at one moment she's smiling and she seems happy, and you slowly see her face change and her eyes fill with tears until she finally calls for, stop everything. I want to go back. And she makes Sarah start taking her to her room. And once they're in a more private area, Sarah attempts to apologize, and the queen just fucking cracks her across the face. And Sarah tells her that it's okay. We do get an idea that Sarah probably does this sort of thing a lot, and whatever the queen's reactions are going to be, Sarah just kind of takes it in her stride. But trying to cheer her up, she starts running with the wheelchair down the hall, trying to cheer her up, which it does work. And when they get to Sarah's room, they don't realize that Abigail is up in the gallery reading, and they start to, get a little handsy, get a little kissy. They start making out. I love the fact that the queen, and you never see this between two women. You'll see this all the time and between men and women, but between two women, the queen says, fuck me, which, okay, get it.
Yeah, no, they made this so real. Like, not to interject on it, but what I love about this movie, and I keep coming back to the characterization, all right? So just going back to the dance scene. So she's watching and she's happy, and she's watching this happiness and this joy happen in front of her. But you see the years of trauma and sorrow and loss come down on her. And I know you felt this too, where you're feeling happy, you're going along, but then that intrusive trauma and sadness invades. Mm-hmm. Because okay, this moment's good, but what about those people who are gone? What about those moments I lost? The could have been, the what could have been, especially since she is disabled and stuck in a wheelchair at this point, which was also very accurate because her physical suffering she's had. She can't dance. And she is actually, in reality, she loved to dance growing up. She actually loved being active. And this is for all the fucking fuck you fat phobics out there. We want to move. We want to do so many things, but when we are stuck with chronic pain and all these ailments, it's really hard to do. I don't know how many times reading about Queen Anne, I saw the historians talk about the fact that it was the trauma of so many pregnancies, the trauma of whatever condition she had, and I'll get to it later, but they thought she might have had lupus. I think I mentioned that, diabetes and all these things that they did not know how to treat at the time. And this is all modern medicine looking back on her life. She wasn't able to do all those things, and she had so much loss that those moments of joy, she's oh yeah, this is great. And then it comes down upon you.
Yeah. Well, and that's one of those things that's so important. Whoever your circle is, whether it's family, friends, or friends that are family, it's important that they're supportive. We get it. And if you're going through it, we are behind you and we wish you all the best. And if you can't do it today, don't beat yourself up. Life sucks enough already. Don't be your biggest critic.
Yep, absolutely. And yeah, I think that's what we see here with Queen Anne just a little bit. And again, that's why I love their characterization and the way Olivia Coleman plays her and Rachel Weisz reacts to her, because she knows the pain that the queen is going through. Whatever we're going to say about Sarah being a bit bitchy, she also understands the queen and does, after all these years, have a genuine affection for her. She wouldn't have gone through so much if she didn't.
At one point, she says to Abigail that the queen is extraordinary, even if others fail to see it.
Yes. So I think that exists here, even though the queen does not have a very trustworthy circle. We're not seeing a trustworthy place. We're not seeing her in a safe place. She has no safe place. She feels like her safe place is with Sarah, but even then, like, you can tell that it's everyone's got an agenda. I mean, any person in power like that, especially a woman, there's always an agenda surrounding her.
But at least in this moment, the queen gets to be happy. She gets to have hot Rachel Weisz sex.
Absolutely.
So good on ya. And Abigail successfully, I thought for sure she was going to get busted.
Absolutely.
Especially when she was coming down those steps.
Oof.
I can't believe she was able to sneak out, but she does. She sneaks out. And who should appear but Hot Harley?
Mm-hmm.
And he sees her with a book, which he immediately accuses her of stealing. And convinces her to go on a walk where he propositions that she be his spy, basically, that he wants her to feed him information on what Sarah is planning, what she's counseling for the queen, whatever he needs to know so that he's got an inside information, which she immediately declines. And he pushes her down a hill.
That was hilarious.
That was, oh, look, a wren, and then pushes her down the hill.
The physical comedy in this movie is pretty damn good.
Yes.
Especially for a modern movie.
The next morning, we see Queen Anne and Sarah. They're kind of in, post-coital bliss, looks like they're enjoying their breakfast, and Abigail is serving them. And we do see another power dynamic at play where the queen wants some hot chocolate and Sarah tells her she can't have any, which, how are you going to tell anybody, but especially a fucking queen? And she also tells her the point when she left the ball, she told Harley, you're right, we're not going to raise the land tax. But now Sarah is telling her, you are going to raise the land tax, and no, you can't have hot chocolate, which pisses her off. She wants to go back to her room.
Sarah mentioned don't have the hot chocolate for a reason because it exacerbates her gout. Even though she's being bitchy, she is for your health.
I assumed it was ulcers because I know when I had stomach ulcers, I had to stop eating chocolate. We see another shooting session between Sarah and Abigail, and as they're shooting, Abigail tells Sarah about the offer she got from Harley to feed him information, but tells her she's not going to do it. You can trust me. And you can even trust me with your biggest secret, implying that she knows about the physical relationship between Sarah and the queen. And Sarah just straight up points a fucking gun at her and shoots, which turns out there's no pellet. And she makes a speech of, this would make a wonderful prank. If there's no pellet in there, but you put in the powder and you pull the trigger, it bangs, but there's no shot. But sometimes it's really hard to remember if the pellet's in there or not. So, a nice little veiled, not so veiled threat.
I love it.
Yeah.
So much.
Abigail wet her bloomers at that because I would have.
Absolutely.
We see Queen Anne. She ends up sending a servant to go and get Sarah, but when Sarah comes, she is standing in her window as if she's about to jump, and she's doing this to get Sarah's attention and to get her pity because she wants Sarah to spend time with her. And Sarah's pointing out, she's busy. Somebody has to do the business of the kingdom. But she promises that she's going to come and spend some time with her this afternoon. Almost immediately, she has to change that because she's monitoring a parliament session and she has to stay to watch and see what's going on. And she sends Abigail in her place. At first, Queen Anne is offended that she has sent a servant to spend time with her, but Abigail very quickly starts to compliment her rabbits and draws attention to that instead. And Queen Anne tells her that there are 17 rabbits. Each rabbit was for one of her losses, whether it was a pregnancy loss, stillbirth, or death of a child.
As a little trivia, that kind of dynamic between Sarah and Anne would do that shit. Not necessarily pretend suicide or anything, but she would constantly basically stalk Sarah. It seems like it would be Sarah stalking Anne or whatever, because it always seems like, and even historically, it seemed like Sarah was the one with the power. And she And she was in a lot of ways, but also Anne would constantly write Sarah every day and get pissed off if Sarah didn't write back. I mean, Sarah would be away taking care of her husband, her children. She also had a couple losses, at least one or two. You know, the affairs of her own estate. And if she was away, Anne would want her to write her every single day, sometimes multiple times a day. And Anne would just write her and like, why haven't I heard from you? And like basically almost stalking Sarah in letter form, in the ancient form. Of like always want Sarah to spend time with her. And when they were together, they had to be together all the time. It was your worst type of clingy friend is what history tells us. Kind of make Anne to be a little simple, and Anne was a little conniving and was also manipulative. So this was like kind of a little bit of a two-way street because Anne knew the little regal power she had. Even though Sarah was very pushy, that was real. Anne would use her leverage to control Sarah while at the same time Sarah used Anne to get what she wanted. It was fucked up.
Yeah.
So there you go.
So Abigail, she does end up kind of growing on the queen. They spend the day playing with the rabbits. I love this next scene. So Abigail is in her room and Masham sneaks in. I love this, quick little, are you here to seduce me or rape me? I'm a gentleman. So rape then. She just kind of like slumps on the bed. Like she's like,
slumps
okay,
backwards
go ahead.
on the bed.
Yes.
All limbs spread.
Yes, I love that because, yeah.
Yeah, that is what the gentleman did back then. You know, absolutely. Like that was perfect.
He tells her that he's interested in her and I think he says, I want to catch you. And she says, I might let you. But she takes off his wig. She messes up his makeup. She lets him kiss her for a moment, but then she bites him then kicks him out of the room.
Makes him bleed.
Yes.
But he kind of liked it.
Yeah.
Like, he didn't know what to do with it at first, but the facial... He's also a good actor. I can't remember. Like,
Samuel Ellen.
Samuel Ellen. I've seen him in a couple other things, and yeah, he's good too, because, like, just the way he's like, what the fuck? Oh, okay, well, I might come back for that.
Right.
Yeah. And he does.
And he does. I love that when she kicks him out of the room, Harley's out there waiting, which is so creepy.
Yeah, that is creepy. And Nicholas Hoult plays it like, well?
Yes. How did it go?
Matter-of-factly.
Yeah. He tells him that, this wig is ridiculous. And I love the line because Nicholas Hoult, he says, well, a man has to look pretty.
Yes, I love it. Yeah.
And just another quick aside about the costumes and makeup and stuff. So they did this on purpose, having the women in natural makeup and the men in wigs and over-the-top makeup. They did that on purpose because it's kind of like a switch. Usually the women are the background decoration, but this time it's the men because this story is about the women, so the men are the background decoration. We next see Sarah lacing Queen Anne into seems to be riding braces. So these leather leg braces that seem to go from her toes up to her hips.
Definitely medical needed.
Kind of like a corset back brace, which I thought was really sad. She, if she wanted to go riding, this is how she had to do it, at least in the movie.
She loved to go riding, so one of the last things she was able to do kind of at this time was get in a kind of chase or a chariot, basically, early 1700s version of a chariot with a horse. There's a quote somewhere, and I'll probably put it in the outtake, where they're like, she rides like a hellion, or like fury, and she would ride around her estate because that was the most physical activity she could do.
We see while they're out riding, Sarah's apologizing for having sent Abigail in her place, but the queen lets her know that she enjoyed spending time with her. And she says that one of the rabbits, whose name I forget, really took to her, and Sarah just... Harold. Sarah just kind of dismisses it and makes a joke, which upsets her. So that just kind of drives home that there's this part of her that Sarah's not taking seriously, but we know Abigail is. So that's gonna kind of help with her relationship developing with Abigail. We skip suddenly to Abigail pushing the queen in her wheelchair down a hallway.
Oh, this scene.
Yeah, this
one hurts.
This one's rough. Abigail is telling the queen about her past, and she's telling her about having been sexually assaulted, and the queen reassures her, but they stop to listen to some music that's being played out on the lawn, and suddenly Queen Anne gets upset again, and she gets out of the wheelchair, and she's screaming at them to stop, go away, I command you, and Abigail is trying to get her to calm down and get back in the chair, and she yells at her and kind of pushes her away, and then she takes off. She's kind of hobbling down the hallway. She's obviously in pain, and suddenly she sees a woman with a baby, and she grabs the baby to hold, and I think, she was just trying to comfort herself, but she's trying to hold and be affectionate with this baby, and the woman immediately takes the baby back and leaves, and suddenly she starts screaming, where am I, where am I? And when the closest footman tells her where she is, she screams at him, how dare you speak to me that way? Abigail finally catches up to her and trying to get her in her chair, I'll take you back to your room, and now she starts berating Abigail, where have you been, you stupid girl, something along those lines. She's just lashing out because she's in so much pain.
Yeah, it was another moment of that feeling joy, but in the moment of feeling all that joy, the sorrow comes down on you. And definitely not a psychotic break, but like a depression break.
Yeah.
I'm sure there's a better term to call it.
I'm sure there's probably a medical term, but I don't know it.
It was tough. And yeah, the woman with the woman let her take the baby for like a good 20 seconds, but she's like, my baby, just I got it, but also like, oh, that was very nice of you to like, I mean, you probably felt like you had to, but.
We then see the queen is resting, and Abigail, trying to cheer her up, tells her that she wants to dance with her. And the queen thinks she's teasing her or mocking her at first, but she does finally convince her, and we see them dancing. Queen Anne has one of her crutches, and Abigail is kind of dancing with the other. They incorporate it into the dance, which I thought was so cute.
It was so cute.
Sweet.
I know Abigail's doing this for an agenda reason, but also, can you imagine the joy that brought the queen to feel so comfortable in that moment and like incorporating her supportive disability aids in that? Like, oh, this is fine. We're going to do this. And I mean, I kind of cried. I definitely teared up.
If you have somebody in your life that's in that position, try to include them in things. And Sarah walks in just after the queen she's fallen, but it's all in fun. She's having a great time. She's laughing. Sarah walks in and sees them having a great time, and she doesn't seem very happy about it. She's not approving.
Little green.
Yeah.
Little green.
And she takes Abigail shooting again. And apologizes for, leaving her to take care of the queen so often. And I think this is where we get the conversation of, she is an extraordinary person, even if others don't see it. And a servant comes to tell them that, the queen has summoned you. But just as Sarah's ready to go, we find out, no, Queen Anne has summoned Abigail. And we see... Oh. We see Queen Anne setting up this little space, and she says, I thought we could race lobsters. And she turns around, and it's Sarah instead. She came instead. She accuses her of having sent for Abigail just to make her jealous.
Oh.
And
I kind of like this, too.
Yes, she kind of very quickly strides across the room, and you can totally see this in like a
She does a very manly move.
My, yes. You could
but it's so sexy as hell.
Yes, this could very much be in like a lovely little trashy novel. No shade. Read those trashy novels.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. It was fully out of bodice rippers, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Oh.
But she strides across the room, pushes her against the bedpost, and she has her arm her hand kind of around her neck, but under her chin, and she goes in to kiss her. But before we can get that totally hot kiss, instead, the cook walks in with lobsters for the lobster race. And
lobsters?
Yes. Sarah plays it off. She backs off really quickly, and she says something like, oh, no, we can't do that. A moat is too old-fashioned.
There was even like a little, she straightens her jacket kind of thing because she's in that hot little white-gray men's riding habit or whatever you want to call it. She even was like, while she was in her face, like, you're trying to make me jealous. Like, God, you don't see that.
You don't. And I'll admit, so I've been reading a lot of biographies lately, but I did very much the first time I saw that, I was like, oh, this is out of like a sexy romance novel. And then I immediately thought, I need to read more trashy romances. We see Harley sneak up on Abigail. Mm-hmm. He wants to know if she has any information for him. And she lets him know that the Queen is going to announce the tax hike at the next Parliament session. And we see at the next Parliament session, the Queen is getting ready. She has her speech, and Sarah's off to the side to, be that support.
Support, quote unquote.
Yeah. Support, twisting her arm.
Mm-hmm, yeah.
Just before she is about to start her speech, Harley jumps up and makes a public declaration to thank her for her good decision and not raising the land tax.
I forgot.
And she looks over at Sarah, who just nods, tries to nod encouragement, and instead she pretends to faint.
Which also is perfect. Like, yes. I would have done that too.
Yeah, I think I probably...
I feel a lot of, like, with Queen Anne, again, with the characterization of, like, someone who's always stuck between a rock and a hard place. She has to be the passive woman, but also trying to advance her own agenda, which she has the right to do. So she ends up, and this is in reality too, in all her letters, she ends up like talking about acquiescing to people's demands, basically being two-faced. I don't know how else to put it. It's not great. I can't even condone a lot of the stuff she does, but it's very two-faced, and she uses a lot of feminine manipulations, things we've been taught since birth, to the passive ways we use power to get what we need and what we want. And Anne had to use them all throughout her life. And so like this, where she's like, I literally don't know what to do, so I'm going to pretend to be the fainting woman with my chronic illnesses. I'm going to use the chronic illness card to faint right now, and then I don't have to deal with this thing. I mean, it's perfect. It was perfect.
Yes, characterization. Absolutely. Abigail wandering around, eating food. She plays with her earrings in a very, very ballsy move. The Queen walks in to find her laying naked in her bed.
Oh, right.
And she's pretending to be asleep, and she's, forgive me, the bed was so beautiful and I got carried away. What she was hoping for, the Queen tells her to leave. So she gets up to get dressed in front of her, letting the Queen see her fully naked. And, I'm so sorry. And she walks out, but she got exactly what she wanted. Queen Anne is thinking about her. Later that night, instead of sending for Sarah, she sends for Abigail to come and quote unquote rub my leg.
Rub my leg.
And I have a fantastic, hilarious fun fact about this later.
All right.
But anyway, so Abigail comes in and she begins rubbing her leg, but she goes higher and higher until she eventually ends up fingering the Queen. Mm-hmm. We also see that Godolphin has gone to Sarah to let her know that he has heard from her husband, Marlborough. He's letting her know that he is in position and the battle can commence at any time. So she's upset and she goes to the Queen for comfort, but she goes through their little secret connected hallway. She walks in and she sees Queen Anne asleep with her arm around a naked Abigail. She's shocked and she retreats back into the hallway. We see Abigail. She opens her eyes, so we know, she's aware. So the next morning we see Sarah. She's up on her ladder in her room. She's throwing books everywhere. And when Abigail walks in, she immediately starts chucking them at her face.
I love this so much.
She even accuses her of theft, which I think, is kind of, you stole my position, basically.
You stole my woman.
Yes. And she comes down and kind of backs her up against the door, and she's telling her, you're dismissed, go back to the scullery, and if they ask you why you've been dismissed, you're a disloyal little bitch. So Abigail leaves, and she still has the book she was carrying, which she starts beating herself in the face with. She hits herself in the face, I think it was 5 times with this book.
That hurt a bit.
Oh my God. Yeah. So she's all bruised and bloodied, and she goes and sits outside the Queen's room and cries very loudly so that Queen Anne will come out and find her sitting on the floor, bloodied and crying.
Not just that, but like a broken doll. Did you see how she sat with her legs kind of
I didn't think
akimbo?
about
like a doll where the legs come out like this, so she looks like a little poor doll.
Oh, I didn't even think about that. It was a very odd way.
I didn't notice that till the third viewing I had.
And we skip to the queen is leaving. She is going out to her carriage.
God, I love this scene too. They're all great.
Sarah is walking her out, and she tells her that she's dismissed Abigail. I think she tells her that she had to dismiss her for theft. But she sees, and we see that Abigail is waiting for the queen at the carriage. The queen has now made her a maid of the bedchamber.
Yeah,
I think
basically.
she says. Sarah just point blank tells her, "You will dismiss her," and she says no because, quote, "I like it when she puts her tongue inside me."
Oh God,
unquote.
I love it. Not even inflection, just
very straight,
matter of fact.
Yeah,
and continues on.
And Sarah's just kind of stunned. She just kind of stands there because, what the hell can you say to that, to this queen? So Abigail gets in the carriage with her. They leave. They're going to the mud baths, and Sarah ends up joining them there, which she climbs into the mud bath with the queen, which if it were anyone else, that would be a
no
hell of an assumption and overstep, but she already knows she's safe doing that. But anyways, she climbs in and she starts joking around with the queen, and this is one of the times we get their pet names for each other.
Mrs. Morley and Mrs. Freeman, which takes you back to my intro.
In this instance, they refer to themselves as Mr.
Morley and Mr. Freeman.
Yeah, and they draw
mustaches.
Yeah, they draw little mud mustaches on themselves, which is kind of cute.
I'm glad they included that because that was an important element for them in all their letters throughout at least the queen's life. So.
They get back to the palace and they kind of, dismiss Abigail for the evening. They're going to
do their thing.
Yep, they're going to go do their thing. They're going to go have some sherry. Sarah, as soon as she gets the queen into her room and around the corner, she tells, you've made your point. Go ahead and dismiss her. And the queen says, she's not trying to make a point. And then she starts kissing her. We jump to Abigail. She's sitting in her room. Masham is sitting on her bed smoking a pipe. And Abigail is kind of talking to herself.
This scene.
And she's trying to convince herself to play dirty.
She's talking to herself.
Yes, very much. And
like out loud.
Yeah, and she's basically telling herself she has to drop her morals if she wants to win. At one point, Masham says something and she tells him, shush when I'm talking. And we see Abigail is brushing the queen's hair and Sarah walks in, she serves them tea. Sarah is telling her again that you need to make the announcement that we're raising the land tax. But Abigail slips something into Sarah's tea. We don't find out what it is, but she slips something in her tea and you kind of get the idea that she's a little suspicious, but she drinks it anyways. The queen is asking Abigail her opinion about raising the land tax. How do you feel that the common people feel about this? And this seems to upset Sarah that she's asking for Abigail's opinion, and also that she would take in consideration the common people's opinion because they're supposed to be led, not lead. Finishes her tea and she leaves. She goes and gets on a horse, and as she's riding, she ends up getting sick. She ends up vomiting and then passing out. Her foot is stuck in the stirrup or a lead or something, and she ends up getting dragged by this horse. And we'll see what happens with her in just a little bit.
That leads up to the summer of 1707, where we're gonna start finding out what happens now that Sarah's a little away for a while.
You see that Harley has gotten his one-on-one with the queen, and he is trying to impress on her the downsides of the war, including the fact that there have been riots, which she was not previously made aware of.
And this was true. There were riots in London over this.
And this has all been kept from her. So this is the first she's hearing of it, and he's letting her know that the people are starting to hate you. And that's something that obviously no monarch wants their subjects to hate them. That's not a good idea.
No.
She promises Harley that she's going to consider his advice, and make her own decision. And, he pointedly says, search your heart, not Lady Marlborough's. And now we see the favor that Abigail has asked for. He says that Masham has fallen in love with Abigail and wishes to marry her, even though she's a servant. And he doesn't present this as coming from Abigail. He presents it as, this is what Masham wants. Can you help us make it happen?
He does his part.
The queen is finally told that Sarah is missing, and assuming that she has taken off out of spite to punish her, she refuses to let riders go out on a search party because, she's doing this on purpose, she believes.
Yeah, it's kind of funny. She's like, no, don't send riders.
Later on, she wakes up and she wants Sarah, and she has a footman take her through the hallway down to her bedroom, and she gets in there, and obviously Sarah's gone. And I love this scene because she says to the footman, find her, and this stupid son of a bitch, he holds up his torch and looks around the room.
It's kind of perfect in the theme of the film of like he literally lifts the lantern and like
just kind of looks around like she's going to be sitting in the corner.
Yeah,
but she demands that a search party go out and try to find her. See the queen telling Abigail that she wants to have her married, and Masham wants to marry you, and Abigail does a good job of pretending to be surprised and humbled, and of course I care for him, not the way that I care for you. That was a cute little. The queen decides, we're going to do this now, right now, before Sarah comes back and puts
ruins
a stop
everything.
to this. Yes, we're going to do this now. So we see this seems to be the middle of the night wedding. Sarah and Masham are getting married. The queen is sitting there looking super excited, and Harley's in the background looking like he's falling asleep in the pew. So she is married, and the queen gives her a grant of £2,000 a year. It's their wedding night. Abigail is obsessing over Sarah. Where is she? What is she doing? What is she plotting? When is she coming back?
Is she alive?
Yes. And Masham is, I'm sitting here hard as a rock, and it's our wedding night. Yeah, she gives him this very distracted hand job, and the whole time she's still mumbling about Sarah. We see Sarah, she is still in the brothel, and she's attempting to leave, but there's this man in the room who's, I'm assuming, there to make sure she can't leave. The sex worker, madam, whatever her role is, she comes in and, tells her that they've sold her horse, but she still owes money, but she can work it off. And instead, Sarah asks her, have you ever seen 10 pounds? And she instructs her where to go to meet Lord Godolphin. You're going to see a man walking a duck. And obviously she goes because we see Godolphin arrive and sees Sarah for the first time since disappearing, and she's very beat up. She's dirty. She's got a cut on her cheek. And he asks her, did they rape you? And she says no, but gainful employment is on offer if ever needed, which I love.
All right, so I have a little bit of a trivia outtake here. We're about to come up on this. Sarah learned that Abigail Hill had been privately married to Samuel Masham, a gentleman of the Queen's household. That's the role Samuel Masham had, but the queen was present at the marriage. Sarah was away at the time. She was not drugged and end up at a brothel, but she was away at the time. Only Robert Harley and the queen knew that Abigail had been married. When Sarah found out that Abigail was married, she didn't really speak on that, but she did start speaking about the fact that Abigail had, for some time, enjoyed the considerable intimacy of her royal mistress, and this was the problem. What's not presented here is also that Abigail, on her father's side, was a cousin of Robert Harley.
Really?
His mother, Abigail Stevens, was a niece of their grandmother, also named Abigail Stevens.
So Sarah arrives back at court just as Abigail she seems to be having like a private concert in her rooms, and Abigail lets her know that she's been married, and she explains she had no choice. You put me in this position. I didn't know where I stood. I didn't know if I was safe. I had to take action and make sure that I was safe, but now I am. Now I'm safe, and isn't this great? We can be friends. And Sarah just bitch slaps her across the face. and then congratulates her on her marriage.
I forgot.
And I just love Emma Stone's reaction, the snort, the way she looks at her. The next morning she comes in and she's wearing lace across the cut on her face to hide it.
Yep.
She's explaining to the queen that, the night before she was going through the letters, all these, letters that the queen has written her over the years, and realizes that if anybody were to ever get a hold of these letters, they could be very damning for the queen. This is the sort of thing that could cost her crown. And she even reads one part from the letter, which we have no idea what the letters actually said, so this is invented for the movie as far as I'm aware. But she reads one of the lines, "I wish to feel the heat from your naked body."
Yeah, we don't have anything like that. Just gonna put that right there.
Yeah, so this was something that they invented for the movie. She tells the queen that she will use these letters if the queen does not do what she wants. And what she wants is for Abigail to be dismissed, the land tax raise to go through, and the 2 appointments that she wants to the cabinet positions. And if she doesn't do these, she's going to use the letters. And the queen asks her, "Would you really do that?" And Sarah tells her, "You have no idea what I would do for my country." We then see that Sarah, she's in her room alone. She's got the letters, and she must have a change of heart. She decides to burn them. But just after she's thrown all of the letters into the fire, a footman comes in and tells her that she's being dismissed. The queen demands she must hand in her key immediately and leave court. And no, she cannot see the queen.
In reality, this minus the letters, this starts to happen. In 1708, so a couple of years after the start of this whole thing, things very much went south for Sarah and Anne. She was angered when Abigail moved into the rooms at Kensington Palace that Sarah had considered her own, though she rarely used them. In July, she came to court with a bawdy poem written by a Whig propagandist that implied a lesbian relationship between Anne and Abigail. The Duchess wrote to Anne telling her she had damaged her reputation by conceiving a great passion for such a woman, strange and unaccountable. Sarah thought Abigail had risen above her station, that writing, "I never thought her education was such as to make her fit company for a great queen. Many people have liked the humor of their chambermaids and have been very kind to them, but 'tis very uncommon to hold a private correspondence with them and put them upon the foot of a friend." Bitch. Then following that, at a Thanksgiving service for a victory in the war, Anne did not wear the jewels that Sarah had selected for her. Petty. At the door of St. Paul's Cathedral, they had an argument that culminated in Sarah offending the queen by telling her to be quiet.
Are you serious?
Yeah,
holy shit.
When Sarah forwarded an unrelated letter from her husband to Anne with a covering note continuing the argument, Anne wrote back pointedly, "After the commands you gave me on the Thanksgiving day of not answering you, I should not have troubled you with these lines. But to return the Duke of Marlborough's letter safe into your hands, and for the same reason, do not say anything to that, nor to yours, which enclosed it." Yeah.
Keep your mouth shut.
Unfortunately, this same year, toward the end of the year in October, Anne's husband, Prince George, died.
He does not make an appearance in the film.
Yeah, he is not in the film at all. This death was a final straw in her relationship with the Duchess. The Duchess arrived at Kensington Palace shortly before George died, and then after his death, insisted that Anne leave Kensington for St. James's Palace against Anne's wishes. Anne resented the Duchess's intrusive actions, which included removing a portrait of George from the Queen's bedchamber and then refusing to return it in the belief that it was natural to, and I quote, "to avoid seeing of papers or anything that belonged to one that one loved when they were just dead."
Damn.
Sarah continued to berate Anne for her friendship with Abigail, and by the next year, Anne wrote to the Duke of Marlborough asking that his wife, and I quote, "leave off teasing and tormenting me and behave herself with the decency she ought both to her friend and queen. And on April 6, 1710, Anne and Sarah saw each other for the last time. According to Sarah, the queen was taciturn and formal, repeating the same phrases. Whatever you have to say, you may put it in writing. And you said, you desired no answer, and I shall give you none. Over and over.
Oof.
I shall return to Brick.
So Sarah has just been dismissed, and she goes through the secret hallway to the queen's rooms, but she's given up her keys, so she can't get in. And she's knocking, and she's begging through the door, and she's apologizing, and she's telling her, I've burned the letters. I got carried away. I'm so sorry. Queen Anne is ignoring her. She's in the room, but she's ignoring her. And eventually Sarah tells her that if she leaves, she's not coming back. I'll go, but I will not come back. Queen Anne, she finally responds. They kind of get into an argument of, I wish you loved me the way that Abigail loves me. She doesn't want anything from me. And Sarah points out that she doesn't want anything, but she's a lady. She's made this grand marriage, and she now has £2,000 a year. She also points out that she tells her the truth, and that's love, is giving these harsh truths. So she's not going to pretend that she's this, beautiful angel fallen from heaven. She's going to tell her when she looks like a badger.
It's a fair statement, but I think there's a fine line between truth and abuse.
Yes. So the queen does not let her in, and Sarah ends up leaving. Kind of jump forward in time. We now see that Abigail is this lady of the court. She's having, it looks like a dinner party, all these people. A footman comes in and takes her. She's been summoned by the queen. Well, when she gets in there, Queen Anne has very obviously had a stroke. And I just want to point out, we never see any care for her. Obviously she would have had some type of care, whatever was available at that time. But in the movie, we see Abigail walks in and she's very drunk. She doesn't even acknowledge that anything is wrong with the queen. The queen asks her to rub her leg, and Abigail gets sick and vomits, tells her to lay down and rest, and she's going to call a doctor for her. It's kind of sad, her face is...
You can see the half of her face stroked.
Yeah,
it's
drooping.
It's limp.
And she just picks up her arm and puts it on the table and gets back to work.
Oh, it's very stark.
We see Harley is in a meeting with the queen. It looks like the council is there, and he is telling her that he recommends they remove Marlborough as head of the army, and Godolphin is, sticking up for him. He thinks it's a bad idea, and after everybody leaves, he also tries to convince the queen to forgive Sarah and allow her to come back, which she flat out refuses. When they kind of settle on, well, what if she were to write you a letter asking for forgiveness and to come back? And she just kind of leaves it at, she doesn't give him a yes, but tells him, I can't stop her from writing a letter. We see this great scene of Sarah trying to write a letter. And
oh god. We watched this montage of Sarah.
Point, she just calls her a dear cunt. Another one, she says that she dreamt that she stabbed her in the eye. She eventually is able to write this letter. We see Godolphin has gone to Sarah. He had told her to write the letter. He's giving her updates on everything, that Marlborough is on his way home, and they have reached a peace treaty with France, and now, ball's in her court. She needs to write this letter. And we see the queen, she's on the lookout for the letter. Every time the mail comes in, she's getting more upset that it's not there, and Abigail is just trying to distract her. We also have a scene that Abigail, who is now keeper of the privy purse, has gone through the accounts, and there seems to be roughly £7,000 missing. Yeah, so you never quite know what this money was supposed to go to, except she's accusing Sarah of having embezzled it, basically. Yeah. And at first the queen dismisses this, but later on at another meeting, when Harley is trying to get a decision of, we need to demote him, what's your decision? And she decides, no, they stole from me. I want them exiled. I don't even want them here anymore. I want them exiled.
Yeah, and that's also after the point where Sarah's letter has arrived, but Abigail burns it.
Yeah, we see that Sally, the bitch maid from the beginning of the movie, she brings her the letter, which she reads and ends up burning. We see it looks like a delegation of people arriving, I am assuming, to tell them that they are being exiled. Sarah's already telling her husband that she's sick of England. She wants wants to leave.
Yeah, you see these people arriving at the Marlborough estate. I'll interject here a little bit. In reality, during all this time, the Queen is increasingly disdainful of the Marlboroughs and her ministry and reeling from the continued unpopularity of the war. And she's heard about these riots in London, which we mentioned long before. She finally took the opportunity to start dismissing some people. First, the son-in-law of the Marlboroughs in June, that was Lord Sunderland. Godolphin was dismissed in August. The Junto Whigs, which only means like the head Whigs, were removed from office, although Marlborough, for the moment, was commander of the army. But in their place, she started appointing all the Tories, including Harley, and they all began to start to seek peace with France. Unlike the Whigs, Harley and his ministry were ready to compromise by giving Spain to the Bourbon claimant, Philip of Anjou, in return for commercial concessions. Once all these people were dismissed from office, largely through Abigail's influence, supposedly, they made way for Harley and other people to become the head, I guess, Junto Tories. So by January 1711, Anne has forced Sarah to resign her court offices, and Abigail took over as the keeper of the privy purse. Also in this year, the Marlboroughs left to travel Europe, and the Duke of Marlborough was dismissed on trumped-up charges of embezzlement, according to historians.
So for our closing, Queen Anne is resting in her room, and Abigail is across the room reading, and the rabbits are out and running around. We kind of see how far from her morals Abigail has come, because now yes, we see her place her foot on one of the rabbits to squash him down.
I did not like this.
No, that was tough to watch. She doesn't kill him, but she's hurting him, and the squealing wakes up the Queen, and she sits up and she sees her doing this. So Abigail, she lets it go, but the Queen has seen it. She doesn't tell her this, though. She gets up and she tumbles out of bed, and she gets up and she, kind of falls out of the bed, and she drags herself over to a chair. Abigail is trying to help her, and how dare you touch your Queen like that? She makes Abigail get down on her knees to rub her leg and says, I'm dizzy. I need something to hold on to, and grabs Abigail by her hair. Yeah. So she's pushing Abigail down, holding her hair, making her rub her leg, just reinforcing that,
you're still beneath me.
You are still beneath me. You are still my servant. And we get this overlay of these rabbits and Abigail just kind of staring off into the distance. This is what she did all these dirty tricks for. This is what she fought for. And now here she is, and this is her life.
Yeah. I thought that last scene was really poignant because, at least on the side of Queen Anne, here I am. I've made all these sacrifices. I have spent my entire life to be Queen of England, and I'm supposed to make this dynasty. And she had 17 pregnancies. Seeing that overlay of the rabbits and her face, which is just miserable. And she's still in control, but also like she has lost so much, and she didn't achieve her ultimate goal, which is to have a child and continue the dynasty. I'll go through a few things. At this point, they've shown where she's had her stroke, that she's basically very bedridden at this point, kind of. We talked about 1708, 1709, 1711. We're now nearing 1713. Anne was virtually unable to walk for about half that year, January and July. By Christmas, she was feverish and lay unconscious for hours, leading to rumors of her impending death. She did recover from that, but was seriously ill again in March 1714. She was rendered unable to speak by a stroke on July 30th, 1714, which was the anniversary of her son, the Duke of Gloucester's death. And then finally, Anne died at 7:30 a.m. on the 1st of August, 1714. John Arbuthnot, one of her doctors, thought her death was a release from a life of ill health and tragedy. He wrote, "I believe sleep was never more welcome to a weary traveler than death was to her." She was buried beside her husband and children in the Henry VII Chapel on the south aisle of Westminster Abbey. In the aftermath, the Electress Sophia, her heir, had died the 28th of May, 2 months before she died. So Sophia's son, George, Elector of Hanover, succeeded pursuant to the Act of Settlement of 1701. George I's accession was relatively stable, despite continued Jacobite schemes, which is another whole other story. The Duchess of Marlborough, our dear Sarah Churchill, has unduly disparaged Anne in her memoirs, and her prejudiced recollections persuaded many early biographers that Anne was a weak, irresolute woman beset by bedchamber quarrels and deciding high policy on the basis of personalities. Oof. Sarah wrote of Anne, "She certainly meant well and was not a fool, but nobody can maintain that she was wise, nor entertaining in conversation. Damn. She was ignorant in everything but what the parsons had taught her when a child, being very ignorant, very fearful, with very little judgment. It is easy to be seen she might mean well, being surrounded with so many artful people who at last compassed their designs to her dishonor." Damn. Yeah. The Marlboroughs returned home on the day of Anne's death. Marlborough was reinstated and the Tory ministers were replaced by the Whigs. They continued in politics and formed a good relationship with George I, who succeeded Anne. After the death of her husband, Sarah continued to make investments and became a friend to Queen Caroline until she also pissed her off as well. Get it, girl. She lived out her life rising and falling in popularity as she did, dying at the grand old age of 84 in 1744. So she done did well. Abigail Hill retired into private life and lived quietly at her country house in Otes until her death in 1734. She had 5 children. Historians have since viewed Anne more favorably, after they stopped only reading Sarah Churchill's memoirs. In his biography of 1980, Edward Gregg presents the Queen as a woman of invincible stubbornness, I believe that, who was the central figure of her age. Gregg depicts her reign as a period of significant progress for the country. Britain became a major military power on land. The Union of England and Scotland created a united kingdom of Great Britain, and the economic and political base for the golden age of the 18th century was established. However, the Queen herself has received little credit for these achievements and has long been depicted as a weak and ineffectual monarch, dominated by her advisors. Brick, take us into the fun facts.
Okay, so Deborah Davis, who originally wrote the screenplay, came up with the idea. She had no experience in screenwriting. She wrote this after taking a night class on screenwriting. Up until she started researching, she had really no knowledge of these women or this period.
Damn.
Yeah. She wrote the screenplay in 1998, and
wow.
She, kind of shopped it around, and one of the first people to show interest was a producer named Cece Dempsey, who just absolutely loved it and really wanted to see it get made. But unfortunately, she had a lot of trouble finding investors because of the lesbian and the lack of male representation, which they, all these investors thought would mean that there was just no interest. And how could there possibly be any interest? There's no guy for her to win in the end, Yeah. So she did, at one point, a decade after originally being written, they were able to bring in another producer, Ed Guinea, who also shopped it around, and it still took almost another decade.
Obviously, yeah.
Yeah,
2018, so 20 years.
Yep, and they still had a hell of a time getting financing for it, which is why it has such a small budget. Internationally, it grossed, I think it said like $98 million.
Jesus.
So
there you go.
Right. So yeah, I do like that, a nice little fuck you. Obviously, since they were on a tight budget, they couldn't put a whole lot of money into costumes. They could not afford to rent costumes, and the movie costume houses did not have many options because this is not a time period that's usually depicted. So they had to get creative. A lot of the things, the costumes and wigs that we see were crafted for the movie. The servants' outfits were made out of denim that was recycled from thrift shops.
Oh, I heard this. This is great.
Queen Anne's dressing gown was a chenille blanket that the costume designer found on eBay.
God, I love it.
One of the other things that they did was they reused pieces. So they would shoot a scene, and when they were done, they would deconstruct the wigs.
This is not a biopic. This movie was never meant to be historically accurate, and we fully acknowledge that this is an artistic piece.
Mm-hmm. There will be a link for this next bit, a interview that Olivia Coleman did on the Graham Norton show, that she was discussing the sex scene between her and Emma was nervous because she can't see where her hands are going underneath the blankets and the nightgown, so she was nervous that she'd go too high up and make Olivia yes, and make her uncomfortable, and like it would be an awkward situation. So Olivia came up with the solution that they would use a large makeup sponge, and she would put that between her legs as a barrier, so she knew when she reached the sponge, okay, you've gone far enough.
Oh, that's perfect.
But Olivia wet the sponge beforehand, so the sponge was wet, and she says she wet, and when Emma was reaching up her legs, she encountered the sponge, and quote, her face was a picture. Unquote. That is my fun list of fun facts.
All right. Well, I only have a few. Fun fact. Again, while modern commentators have concluded Anne was a lesbian, most have rejected this analysis. In the opinion of Anne's biographers, she considered Abigail nothing more than a trusted servant and was a woman of strong traditional beliefs who was devoted to her husband. This does bear out in the historical context. Anne was very devoted to her husband, George. For being arranged marriage, they actually got along really well. Obviously, she had 17 pregnancies. Like, they actually really liked each other, and she was also very devout in her spiritual beliefs. So there's no telling. Even if she didn't have a relationship with Abigail, maybe she had a relationship with Sarah. They were incredibly close.
There was definitely, because she did try to blackmail her with letters, that she did try. So there was something in those letters, but that's not to say that it had to be sexual in nature.
Yeah.
She could have just been talking shit about her nobles.
There is a quote. Sarah implied and threatened Anne by saying, like, I have such things that would lose the crown. Not verbatim, but, there was things that we don't know, as always with historical context.
This is one of the few times where they're like, no, they were totally just friends, when it probably was just friends.
Or at least, like, it was more of, we've all heard of emotional affairs.
Yep.
Like, they definitely could have emotionally been in love with each other, which is definitely a thing. And maybe it just didn't culminate in a physical relationship. Regardless, I'll leave that there. And I will have plenty of things in the outtakes. We'll go ahead and move on to our sources.
There are those two books, if anyone is interested. The Favorite by Ophelia Field is a biography of Sarah Churchill. For other sources, I will be including links to Wikipedia and IMDb, and the link to the Graham Norton show interview with Olivia Coleman. I believe that is it for my link.
All right. So for me, obviously, my main source was Queen Anne, The Politics of Passion by Anne Somerset. I also went into some videos. A Lesbian Queen of England? ? How Historically Accurate is the Favorite by Jessica Kelgrave-Fozard. Queen Anne, The Last of the Stuarts documentary by The People Profiles. The Stuarts, The Dynasty That Survived a Plague, Fire, and Civil War by Real Royalty, and several others that I will put into the show notes. Obviously, books. Sovereign Ladies, The Six Reigning Queens of England by Maureen Waller. I also wanted to read, but didn't get to, Queen Anne, The English Monarchs series by Edward Gregg. They were cited in Anne Somerset's book, so I will leave that there. I also read a few articles. The real women of The Favorite included an 18th century Warren Buffett, that's referring to Sarah Churchill, who really was Queen Anne, The Truth About the Favorite's Forgotten Monarch by Olivia Blair, and again, several others that I will link in the show notes. There we have it. So shall we announce our next movie that the Brick has chosen?
Yes, the Brick hath spoken. And our next movie will be 2007 Persuasion, based off the Jane Austen novel of the same name.
All right, well, everyone, that's it for today. Thank you for listening to Celluloid Chronicles, a historical movie podcast. Please like and subscribe to us wherever you listen, and we hope you join us again soon. And live
like you're making history.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Have a good one.